The most impactful one in my practice has been the fasting mimicking diet. That is a 5-day diet, very scientific. It's got very specific number of calories and macros and things that you're supposed to do for 5 days. And it transforms no end of body processes in a way. And the idea behind it is that actually what it's doing is it's waking up whatever program that our ancestors had programmed already in their genes to survive periods of low energy availability.
Hi, I'm Dr. Monica Jauregui, and welcome to Truly Healthy MD. I have one question for you. What's really behind the way you feel? As a functional medicine doctor, I'm passionate about helping you uncover the hidden causes of your health concerns and finally connecting the dots. From balancing hormones to overcoming Lyme disease, boosting brain health, or just finding new ways to feel your best every day. This podcast is packed with insights and strategies to help you take control of your health and live wholly. Ready to explore what's possible and be truly healthy?
Hello, welcome back to the Truly Healthy MD podcast. I'm Dr. Monica Jauregui. Today I have my colleague and friend, Dr. Myrto Ashe. She is an MD, MPH. She originally trained as a family physician and practiced 20 years in community health centers in Massachusetts, California, and Colorado. After noticing the failure of a conventional medical approach to improve symptoms for a close family member, she began to study alternatives to medications and to try some of these practices on herself and her family. The near immediate improvement in everybody's health was so compelling that in 2011, she decided to orient her entire practice around functional medicine. After many years of doing so much research, Myrto has finally written her first book, and we'll talk about that book, The Simple Science of Wellness. This highlights 60 of the most accessible and effective health practices she has been teaching her patients. To go along with this book, Myrto has created the brand new Simple Science free weekly newsletter, which I get and I definitely recommend to explore these practices in depth and make them even easier to adopt. Welcome to the Truly Healthy MD podcast, Dr. Myrto Ashe.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Monica.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about foundational health practices. And this is an excellent topic. Sometimes I feel like people get a little bit overwhelmed with wanting to get the newest and the best, and they end up thinking that they can't improve their health unless they take a ton of supplements or pay for a real expensive evaluation. But I love talking about the foundationals because they are so important, and we really should be helping our community understand this better. So to start off the conversation, I did want to ask you about, the difference in conventional medicine, functional medicine. What does functional medicine bring to the medicine conversation that's missing in conventional medicine?
So for me, I think that's been a critical question because I did 20 years of conventional medicine, and then adopting something new, I was really determined to not adopt things that don't work, and then again have to sort of backtrack and find what works over time. And so I've been really sort of not critical, but I guess I've been really strict with the things that I try to adopt in my practice, because it feels to me like a lot of conventional medicine was based on habits and sometimes hearsay. And, we would sometimes do what worked for one patient, we try it in another. And sometimes that was missing, a little bit of rigor. You end up sort of out in left field doing that. But the thing that struck me switching from one system to another is, first of all, the degree to which integrative medicine and functional medicine are based on a belief that the body actually has an innate intelligence, and that actually it tends to health. And so that what your job is really to find tools that it might be missing or obstacles that are in your way that otherwise it would tend towards health. And I think that that's really an attitude that I had never come across in conventional medicine, where there's more of a sense that entropy is the principle of the day, and that things will fall apart if you don't intervene. And that, I think, is a really different mindset. And I'm not saying that I know for sure that is going this way or that way, but I'm just saying that it's interesting how different the two mindsets are and how they sort of lead you to doing different things for patients. And then,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then the other one would be this idea that your body's actually trying to help you. Symptoms actually can be used to figure out how to help you, as
Yeah.
opposed to just suppress, and
For sure, for
move
sure.
on. Suppress and
Yeah.
move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was practicing mostly conventional medicine, and I still practice unconventional, just I integrate it with functional medicine. I used to hate seeing a super long list of symptoms in the review of symptoms that we call it, because I'm like, oh, I have to deal with all these symptoms. But now I love it because it's more clues. The more the symptoms, the more clues I have to what's going on with my patients. So it's just a completely different mindset and paradigm, like you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been, and also there's something really exciting about it. It's like we believe in nature, we believe in ecology, we believe in sort of the innate goodness of these things. And so it's kind of cool to join that. It's like the human body is also nature, it's also ecology, it's also something that may have some innate goodness to it. I don't know. It feels like I didn't have that sense before. And
Yeah.
now, like, I feel like my patients, I think of them as having joined, like, yeah, we're going to try to bring you back to something that's not unnatural, something that's
Yeah.
natural.
Restore the way things are supposed to work. I
Yeah.
love that.
And so I think that ends up sort of also informing the things that I'm interested in then. So because of that, I'm more excited when my solution is a solution that seems to go with nature, go with the past, ancestral. Actually, the initial title of my book was going to be Ancestral Wellness, because I'm interested in these ancestral practices, sleep and fasting. And they're not, sexy, unfortunately. They're not, exosomes or peptides, but those things can also be really useful. It's just not where my heart lies.
Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and I, I do love having this conversation about the mindset. That's very different how we approach patients when a lot of people are used to the conventional model and trying to explain how the functional medicine model works. And just to take just one step back, for those people who may not really understand what functional medicine is, let's talk about that just for just a second in case anybody out there is confused.
Yeah, so functional medicine, the way I see it, is really sort of leveraging the latest science to try to reverse or stabilize at least illness, and by going to the root causes of illness. Yeah, something like that. That would be the way to
Yeah.
describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think root cause is the way that I always try to explain it. And I just want to make that clarification because sometimes people would be, looking at this and being like, wait, I thought functional medicine was getting all these elaborate tests and doing stuff maybe with supplements instead of medications. And that is not exactly what functional medicine is. Yeah, we do have more tools in our toolbox. Maybe we'll offer you more tests than a conventional medicine doctor has at their disposal. Yes, we'll integrate potentially some supplements, but it's not just substituting a pharmaceutical for a nutraceutical. So just wanted to get some clarity there for our listeners.
Right, exactly. We're gonna, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are gonna go on if you see a functional medicine doctor, but ideally, the tests are gonna be in the service of eventually getting you back on some sort of path where you're healthier. So for example, I'll do tests and I'll check people's nutrient levels, for example, because there's a lot of research showing that there's an ideal level of nutrient that can help a number of different situations. But my hope is that by correcting some basic fundamental ways that the body works, that eventually you don't necessarily stay on all of these supplements, because because we have no research. Once we're using large doses of this or that, you really don't know what you're doing. You're just hoping so at the very least you could do is to use them temporarily or not
Yeah.
forever, right?
If you like this discussion, please hit the subscribe button and consider leaving us a review. It really helps people find us, and we truly appreciate your support. Absolutely, yeah, yeah. What we try to do is restore function, not just put people on supplements to take the place of a pharmaceutical or to control symptoms. Very, very important topics for our listeners to understand. I absolutely love practicing integrative and functional medicine, but it's not perfect either. Any drawbacks that you see in functional and integrative medicine?
Yes. So I guess I think that it's sort of the same vein as we've been talking so far. It's really about, like, are you just trying to replace medications with a substance that coerces the body really into doing the thing that you want it, that you think it should be doing? Or are you really trying to solve, back to the root cause level, a problem that, so one of my most influential books when I started actually is a book that Mark Hyman is a co-author of it. I think it's called, now it's going to be Ultra something, of course, because it's one of the Mark Hyman books. So yeah, I'm going to forget about it. But the bottom line of the book was that there's 4 root causes, really. One of them is nutrient deficiency, and one of them is oxidative stress, and one of them is inflammation. And then the 4th is toxicity. And you can bring everything sort of down to those things. So if you have a person with, I don't know, a headache, and you can find herb that gets rid of headaches, it's like, yeah, but those are not headache, one that does not necessarily address one of the root causes. Like you're guessing that, you don't know what the root cause was. You just use the herb. And so first of all, it's not going to work in everybody. And also you don't know what else you're doing. And you didn't get it. That wasn't the mission. If you're functional medicine, the mission really is to figure out what the underlying cause is, because if you can fix that, then you can fix the other consequences that would have arisen from that same root cause. And
Absolutely.
so that's sort of,
Yeah.
you
And
feel
then And then hopefully we can get people off all these pills. I definitely prefer my patients to take something natural instead of pharmaceutical, but ultimately, if I can get them off everything, pharmaceutical and natural, that's better. The only way to do that is by addressing the root causes.
right. And so this is where, so some of them are going to be about exposure, right? So, toxicity is as much about getting rid of the toxins as it is about not being exposed to the toxins. Inflammation, you have a lot of work to do, try to figure out what's going on. But anyway, so for me, I got really excited about that as opposed to finding a fun plant for this or a fun plant for that. And then when I started practicing, I also found that the herbal remedies are helpful because you do want to address symptoms. I mean, there's no reason for people to suffer any longer than,
Yeah,
right? You do
absolutely.
something about the symptoms as well, for sure. But I also found that they weren't as powerful as some of the other things I was learning about. Not as many people were wowed by them. So I kind of enjoy wowing patients. Like when they come, right, and you suggest something that seems a little like weird, they've never heard about, and then they come out the other end of it and they're like, so one guy was actually a doctor. He tried the fasting mimicking diet, so transformed his life. He's like, where has this been all my life? Why is it I don't know about this? So I love, that's an incredible amount of excitement to be able to do that with people. So for me,
Absolutely.
it's that's the main thing. I'm trying to think if I wrote anything else there. The other problem that we have, I think, with even when they're not, well, when they're plant and plant extracts, clearly it's not the same thing as the plant or the tea. Like taking green tea extract is not necessarily the same thing as drinking the tea. So we are doing something slightly unnatural, but even more so when we're taking curcumin and we doctor it up really in a way that it gets absorbed into your bloodstream at a high rate. Not that I don't use it, I personally use it, but I also understand that it's not something that we know as much about as we would like. B vitamins is another way, like we're using methylated folate. Okay, so methylated folate is not the form it comes in nature, in food. So what are we doing? And then we use amounts that are very high compared to what would be in food.
Oh, yes.
What are we doing there? So yeah, we are trying to address disease. And so there is some amount of intervening, but I think that's the other drawback of integrative and functional medicine is that, to be honest with ourselves, we don't always know everything, as opposed to if we recommend to a person to have a diet that has a variety of vegetables in it and plant, we're in pretty good company. Like there's so much research telling us that that's the right way to go.
Fatigue, brain fog, mood swings, weight gain. If you're a woman in your 40s to 70s, you've probably been told that it's just aging. But what if it's not? At trulyhealthymd.com, we look deeper. Hormones, nervous system health, hidden toxicities. You're not broken. You just need a doctor who really listens. Visit trulyhealthymd.com and book a consultation today. It's time to feel like your real self again.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least having that awareness that just because we're recommending a pill doesn't, a natural supplement is not the same as integrating something in their diet. That awareness is the first step, but you're absolutely right. It's not the same thing.
Right. And it still feels reassuring. I mean, I think that some of it is a little bit of a mindset, and some of it is just that I've seen sort of, 38 years later or whatever, however long I've been practicing for, that it's really sort of the hubris of thinking that we're going to use aspirin, to get to reduce heart attacks. Like, yeah, nice, but there's actually a drawback. And so it's taken how long? 20 years? So we no longer have the recommendation now to be using aspirin in people who don't have a high risk factor for heart disease. So, it's taken a long time, but there it is, should be using that. Even Tylenol, like, how many pregnant women have I said that, taking Tylenol is perfectly fine, no, maybe not. So research comes out 20, 30 years later that there are drawbacks. It depends what you study and what you look at. So, so it still feels like I'm going to still prefer maybe an extract, but no, because yeah. So this is a drawback. This is a place where we stand where we're not certain. We're not certain of our recommendations 100% any more than a doctor could be about the pills they recommend.
Yes, very, 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 very true. I think that's important for us to understand that as physicians, because as physicians we want to help, and sometimes it's easier to say, oh well, just take the supplement instead of doing all the education of how do you change your diet. And so and patients too, they like the quick fix sort of effect, like, oh, I could just take the supplement and then it'll be as good as changing all these things in my diet. It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, and it has more of that, I guess I call it a coercive aspect. You're not creating a change, and whatever happens, I guess there's another line that really impressed me way back when, is a Mark Hyman line where he says that health is sort of your symptoms disappear as a side effect of becoming healthy.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we also have to recognize that sometimes supplements can be very useful because we can get really high concentrations and use them therapeutically for a little while to, let's say, as an antimicrobial. And so as
Yes.
long as we have that intention, then absolutely, we can definitely use a supplement. But to replace a food is not the same thing.
Right. You don't want to replace a food. And also ideally, you may not have the same power. I think these things work together. You may not, first of all, you may not win, so to speak, if your patient isn't also doing some foundational things, like sleeping and some kind of stress reduction, some of the really foundational things. And also so that you will want to do these things together in concert.
Well, tell us more about those. What is a foundational practice? Tell us that.
Right. So for me, they're the things that make complete sense, and understanding the power of them, and that hopefully improves the motivation. So for example, sleep. I mean, it seems obvious, but so many of our body processes are completely, related to enough sleep. So you can't bypass it. You can't say, all right, I'm going to be healthy. But I'm going to continue to sleep 4 hours a night or 5 hours a night, right? So I want to reverse my insulin resistance, but I'm not willing to, So anyway, so to pay attention to these things. Exercise is another one. What's fun to me about exercise that I discovered in the last couple of years only is really the impact on the immune system. How does that even work, right? So muscles, when you contract them, put out hundreds of myokines. So it doesn't even make any sense. It's like, you either contract it or you don't contract it. Why hundreds of different myokines, right? It's got to be some kind of language. I mean, it has to be at that level of precision if it's going to be hundreds of myokines in my mind. So I find it really fascinating, and I think that it's going to be a long time. I understand AI is coming, but I think it's going to be a long time before we can come up with a therapeutic that puts out in a coordinated fashion hundreds of different substances that all have jobs to do in your body. So I think that sort of, that for me, that's a foundational practice. It's the thing that you do that seems simple, like strength training, let's say, or even just carrying heavy things around your house or whatever. That seems really simple. And like, it's like, yeah, the muscle, I made it stronger. But actually what's happening inside is completely different level. It impacts your gut bacteria, it impacts your brain, it impacts your immune system, it impacts everything that you have, your hormones, whatever. Insulin resistance, and so on. In the end, it impacts longevity. And so who's surprised when you sort of look at it from that point of view, like your muscles were given a chance to write a book and send all that information to the rest of your body. Another fun one for me I discovered recently was coordinating eating with daylight, because it turns out that 60% of our gut bacteria, which, in and of themselves are fairly new in terms of a discovery, 60% of them actually have a diurnal rhythm. And how do they know, when it's night and day, or how do they know to coordinate their rhythm really is whether they receive food or not. And so there is a real need for there's a real advantage of, not everyone can do it, I suppose, but there's a real advantage of a really regular time of eating and fasting. So, and the other thing that some of the studies are showing is that there's a big difference if you're going to eat between 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and 4, 5, 6 p.m. versus noon to 8 or whatever, some of the other schemes that people have come up with. So I thought that was really amazing, because I had thought of that, like, yeah, I suppose the bacteria could get the idea from the eyes going to the pineal gland and then sending hormones throughout the body, melatonin, telling the bacteria it's light or day. But actually, the way that many of them do probably is just, did you start eating? Did you stop eating? And then that's kind of how they know to function. The way they function is tied to those eating and fasting rhythms. So those are some of foundational practices. I think the most impactful one in my practice has been the fasting mimicking diet. That is a 5-day diet, very scientific. It's got very specific number of calories and macros and things that you're supposed to do for 5 days. And it transforms no end of body processes in a way. And the idea behind it is that actually what it's doing is it's waking up whatever program that our ancestors had programmed already in their genes to survive periods of low energy availability, or, So what's interesting is that, there's been a lot of interest around fasting and water-only fasting, for example. But actually, water-only fasting is probably not as natural as eating very little. Like if you're, a caveman, probably you'll find, 4 or 5 leaves or a couple of roots to eat, even on a famine day. And so fasting mimicking diet is 5 days where you're eating very few calories, but not water fasting. And so I think that is interesting. They did one study where they compared the two, and they said, actually, from the point of view of your gut bacteria health, fasting mimicking seems better than water-only fasting, probably because you're feeding them a little something. And in my mind, I'll go back and I try to think to myself, well, wait a minute, which one of those might be a little bit more according to ancestral, whatever, according to what our ancestors might have had to face. So it transforms gut bacteria. It is supportive for cognition. It reduces inflammation a lot. It improves autoimmune disease, and it makes a big difference with insulin resistance and also ultimately with cancer and cancer therapeutics. So to have one thing like that has that kind of like octopus tentacle situation, like you do one thing and you're like all of a sudden all of it, is being impacted. To me, that's a foundational practice. It's like,
that's amazing. That's
the body
amazing.
was waiting for that. The body was waiting for you to do that.
Yeah. So very powerful, very powerful. So how do these foundational practices get their powers to transform our health?
Right. I think that they are tying in or triggering or tripping some mechanism or series of mechanisms that are already there. And that this is maybe how evolution, I don't know what you want to call it, has us set up. And so you are taking advantage of something that's already set up. And you're not coercing, you're not going against something. You're actually, using something that was already there.
Yeah. Like I always tell my kids, you got to work smarter, not harder. And we can do the same thing with our patients. We can help them heal in a smarter way and not in a hard way.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, it's unfortunately a little inconvenient. It's like it gets in the way of your life. You cannot keep your same exercise routine going, especially if you're a kind of person that does a ton of exercise. And for 5 days, you're going to actually have to, pull back a little bit. Even, there are little tricks so that you can continue to work, because all of us sort of need to do that. But it's noticeable. It has an impact in the immediate, and then you sort of emerge from it. And it's been one of the most transformational practices for me, for my patients. I use it whenever any of those conditions come up.
And so tell us, so you've been gathering all this data about the foundational practices for a while, and now you're able to share it with the world in your book. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. So as I was sort of thinking about how I practice, I kept thinking to myself, I have a whole bunch of sort of no cost, low tech advice. Like, you want to sleep? Well, the number one thing to do is get out in the sun in the morning, get out and get some light for 20 minutes first thing in the morning. That actually gets this little Rube Goldberg, sequence of things started hormone-wise to make you sleepy at bedtime. And I'm like, I was thinking to myself, in the midst of this, can be expensive functional medicine and all the supplements and all the tests. We have these powerful, really easy to learn, like there's no ramp up, you can learn it immediately and it costs you absolutely nothing. And it would be nice to put those together in a book. So my first chapter is, my first chapter is fasting, which is not only no cost, but will save you money.
I know, right? Actually saves you.
Yeah. And then the second chapter is, no cost, no tech. Like you don't actually need to learn anything to do some of these practices. Journaling is another one, so we go into, some really easy, no tech also means really easy to learn. Obviously, some things you have to follow a little bit of instructions. And then, the next chapter after that is, maybe no cost or low cost. And there's a little bit of learning maybe to do. And so there's also things in there that you may have to learn quite a bit to do them, but we have really exciting data on it. For example, the Younger You diet, there's a lot of details to it, but it's a diet where it's, at least the study that they did with 8 weeks of people being on this diet actually got 3 years younger, if you believe the genetic. Epigenetic.
And how did they measure that?
They did the clock testing. So as you age, your genes get tagged with these, methylated, they get tagged a certain way. And so older people have a certain pattern of gene activation that's different than younger people. And so basically what they showed is that eating these foods, some of these reversed, some of these tags got removed from the genes so that people came across in that test as younger. And we don't know, will this continue? Will you become a baby if you do this diet for many years? Or will you
become a baby?
At some point, you'll just sort of reach some kind of plateau. Reasonable.
At some point, yeah. And I love all those type of recommendations that we can give patients and the general public that are not expensive and are things at their reach that they can do. And so I'm very excited that you wrote this book. I actually bought a copy, and tell people where you can get your book if they're interested.
It's at Barnes and Noble. So you can either look up my name or the Simple Science of Wellness on Barnes and Noble. To my surprise, there was another group that called their book The Simple Science of Wellness, but they're not me, and it's not, the book looks different, and the description is going to be different. So I think most people can tell.
Okay.
That's the only place right now. I'm trying to put it in one more place, but as a self-published author, everything is a learning curve. And this is one where I've had to stop after a while trying to learn new things.
Definitely. I think it's amazing that you put all this together, and I hope it helps a ton of people out there, because there's a lot of things that people can be doing that doesn't entail spending a lot of money or taking a ton of supplements that can improve their health. So I'm so happy that you put this together, and I'm enjoying reading it for sure.
So the other thing I wanted to do with the book is to actually back them up. Is to say, like, what is the data what is the evidence we have that these things even work? Because I think that that's the other place where people are confused, that most of the newsletters and blogs out there honestly just tell you, do this, do that, and it's like, oh yeah, I could do that. And then actually, but wait, is the data behind that in rodents? Is it actually in test tubes? Is it really data that's been done on humans and where the study was reasonable quality, or is it maybe a little bit preliminary? So this is the difference that I wanted to make in the book.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because to me, that's extremely important. I don't want people to just be doing something because a health influencer told them or because they saw a cool commercial. And so as physicians, we consider ourselves that we do things that's evidence-based. So again, let's get back to the basics. What is evidence, and how does somebody determine if it's good evidence, if it's something that we should be listening to? And that goes back to talking about the difference between conventional and functional medicine. A lot of people might think that functional medicine is not evidence-based. So let's also incorporate that in this conversation.
Yeah, good point. And I think that actually I look at both as being both. What I was saying earlier is that I practiced conventional medicine for 20 years. In many cases, the things that I did were backed up by really good evidence, where well, I guess I have to define what I call really good evidence. But I guess my point is that some of it was based on, let's put it this way, some of it was based on a type of evidence called research randomized controlled trials, where you randomize. So you take a population and you assign them. You say, you guys are going to do it this way, and you guys are going to do it this way, but actually it's going to be a placebo, so you won't know who's who and who's doing what. And then the outcome of that is measured by people who also don't know who was on what. That's your ideal randomized double-blind control trial. And I think that that's ideal because it takes out all of the bias that has to do with some of the other ways that you could do research. But that ultimately, I think that there's few medical procedures or medical medications, whatever, that have that kind of level of evidence. And so we ended up having to rely also on what our colleagues were doing, or someone who taught us and we respected what they said, and things like that. And so that's another form of evidence. And when medicine talks about evidence-based, actually, they do list several, 5 or 6 or 7 different kinds of evidence. And it's fair. You can go by, influencer or guy I trust, or, you can go by that as well. But what I think is really important is to be honest about what you're going by. That's all. And so for me, the one that I rely on the most is I like to see a double-blind control trial. If I don't have one of those, I'll just say it like, okay, I think this also works, and it's an impression I have, or I've based it on someone I respect who tends to be reasonable. Over the last 38 years, I've found them to be reasonable, something like that. So this is kind of what the different types of evidence are. So I don't know. I think that, in a way, you could say that functional medicine has more of the sort of influencer or person I trust habits or practices or things that we do based on what someone else said, as opposed to conventional medicine. But conventional medicine has a problem with big money, basically, who funded what research and whether the result of the research was influenced by the funder. So that's something that maybe we have a little less of that in functional. I'm not even sure about that, but it's possible.
Yeah. Well, I do think there's a lot of practices in conventional medicine that we assume are evidence-based, but they're not. So I think there needs to be some honesty there too. And I think there's a lot of stuff that we do in functional medicine that's even more evidence-based that we do that is done in conventional medicine, just because we consider ourselves early adopters, right? So we're reading the research, we're a little bit more on top of that data sometimes than conventional medicine. There might be a lag in conventional medicine by the time there's some research, and then it gets incorporated into the guidelines. And so there's a lot more to that story than just saying that there's more randomized controlled trials in conventional medicine and maybe not in functional medicine.
Yeah, that's really interesting because for me, functional medicine has had two things that are really very different than conventional in terms of how I practice and how I go about my day. So one thing is, first of all, that I do a ton more reading, so much more reading. And that's because people are coming who did not get relief from conventional medicine typically in my practice. I guess maybe because I'm an MD, I get, people are coming because they don't want to leave. They don't want to throw out all of medicine. They just were wondering who might have some more ideas because the ones that they've tried so far didn't work. And so on a daily basis, I have to read. I have to see like what else is there that someone else may not have seen or. I remember this one woman, she came in with she had a neuropathy that was really bad, and her mom had a similar neuropathy. So she was getting a lot of pain in her feet. And her mom had gone the same way. And she had a neurology specialist. And she was coming to me to see if I had anything else. So I started Googling, it's kind of sad to think about, but I started Googling, like, what are like some, genetic I'm not a neurologist. So I found one where it was a deficiency of a certain amino acid. And if you could give large amounts of that one amino acid, you could get an improvement in symptoms. And it was published. And we ran it by her neurologist, who said, yeah, it's early research, but yeah, I suppose I don't see the negative to that. So it was kind of like my contribution was really having some time after the appointment, or making some time, because that's how I structure my practice, making some time after the appointment to do the reading. And it's almost funny because as a conventional family medicine family doctor, I liked healthy patients. I did not want to spend hours after the appointment reading. But
Oh
in
yeah,
part it was because
it's possible.
in part it was because it was so hard to find to help people with. And it feels to me like with some more tools, actually, no, I do have more things. I can find more things. And the other difference is the degree to which we're networked. And I think with other functional medicine docs. And I think that may have to do with social media and the internet, and also cell phones and texting. But if I have a question, I can reach out 5 different ways, and every day involves helping others with their questions as well. And I don't remember clinic work that way ever in the past. Yeah, you once in a while call a specialist and curbside them, right? Get some ideas from them. But this is daily. Daily, the part of the work is reading articles, sharing them with others if you think that they might be able to use them, and then answering their questions and asking your own questions.
Oh yeah, I love telling my patients, you know what, I actually don't have the answer to that, but I have a great network of very supportive colleagues, and I'm sure there's somebody that might have already seen this, researched it, so I will get you that answer. So yeah, we are definitely very connected in that way.
Yeah, and I think that also the times have changed a little bit, where in the past, some patients might have believed that you're only a good doctor if you know everything. And now I would think that that kind of attitude would be very rare.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
understand that. Yeah.
I think patients respect when you say, I definitely know this, and if there's something I don't know, it's okay for me to accept that, as long as I will do the effort to try to figure it out. And that's better than
Right.
trying to lie to them and tell them, oh yeah, I know everything, because
I
that would be
know, I know. I can understand why people do that. Although, I mean, I can see why. I actually literally had that experience with 2 patients in a row one time. This is like, we're talking 3 decades ago. But literally, I had 2 patients come in a row where I didn't know the answer. And the first one, I opened the textbook and she was like, wow, I love this. I love that you're doing this for me. And I love that you're, willing to admit. And the next patient comes in and same thing. I didn't know the answer. I opened the textbook. She goes, oh, I don't want to ever come see you again. You don't know the answer.
I know. I was actually going to say,
Oh.
I've had different types of patients. I have had some patients that tell me, I actually want somebody that's more confident in what they already know. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Then I might not be the right doctor for you, because I'm always searching for new things. And if you want somebody that already knows everything, you can try
There
to
are people, yeah, and then also there are people who believe they know everything, right? So they're saying it out of personal conviction. I just think it's really amazing to be able to know what the limits are of one's knowledge. That's a great service to people. So try to do that.
Yeah.
And it's almost funny too, because, I started in functional medicine thinking, okay, well, I'm ramping up to a new, specialty. And in a couple of years, I won't be having to read so much. well, you better get used to it because no, everything's a rabbit hole and you can get some real actionable insights by putting in some time.
Yeah, I always think back to that pie chart. It's like it's a circle, right? A pie chart. It's like a little sliver is things that you know, and then things that you know that you don't know. And
Oh,
then
yes.
how big is a sliver of the things that you know you don't know, or you don't know you don't know. Sorry. The
The
biggest
things you
part,
don't know are a real problem.
the
The ones
biggest
that
part
we get.
is the things that you don't know, and that's what gets us into trouble. And what I see in the smarter the person is, or the more aware they are, the more they'll recognize that there's so much that they don't know. If it's somebody who has less training, is overly confident, they seem to assume that they know more than they do. And then these people who have multiple PhDs and are researchers, they're the people that will tell you, well, there's just so many unknowns. And so
Right.
yeah, that's interesting.
It's true. It is true. You can get some direction. And you can get some direction. You can get, like this idea, like, oh, I have seen, 3 people like you or something. I mean, that's nice to be able to have. I know where to look, those are the things that I think are really important.
Yeah. And speaking of us being able to come together and use each other as resources, I would also like to talk about the organization that both you and I are a part of. As physicians in this functional integrative space, it's sometimes difficult because we're not practicing the same as mainstream. So we don't get the same support as mainstream doctors. So we've decided to band together and form an organization to support ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about CFIP. And most of our listeners will be people who are not doctors. There might be some doctors out there that are listening to this that would be interested in this. But even for the general public, it's important for them to know that we are we have formed an organization that we're stronger united, and we'll have resources where people can find a functional doctor on our website in the future. So tell us a little bit about what this College of Functional and Integrative Medicine Physicians is.
Yeah, I think that basically it had sort of 2 mandates. The basic idea of CFIP is to provide support to functional and integrative physicians. And so the kind of support that it seemed like we all needed was, well, one of the important ones was to try to distill the levels of evidence that are available for the practices that we think are the most useful. And so when group is, the clinical perspective group that is going to be looking at, that basically has started looking at what are some of the practices that we do? What is the evidence base behind them? It could be any of the things that we mentioned before. It could just be, bench research. It could be rodent research, or it could be someone I love uses this, and it could be there as randomized control trials. So it could be any level of research. But to be able to sort of, elucidate that, like put that out, like, okay, so this is what we know, and this is what we do, and this is what we do it.
Yeah.
And then some other parts of the organization, though, is about reaching out outside the organization and being able to say, all right, now you guys are interested in functional medicine. What are you to look for? How do you know, there are maybe more resources for trying to figure out how to get a good doctor. Like you're going to ask, your friends, you're going to look at their credentials. And then is there anything different about finding a good functional medicine doctor or integrative medicine? And then for our colleagues who are not familiar with functional and integrative medicine, also sort of the same sort of outreach and saying, this is where, we practice both. So for us, it's easy. It's like, this is where this differs from that. This is why we're still in the integrative field, and why it's fairly rare for someone to just abandon all integrative medicine and jump back into just conventional, because it just feels like we have more tools and we help more people. And so, and yet, sort of agree with them that there are some practices that we disagree with in the integrative sort of space. Yeah, I mean, I used to joke, right, that, anything would be fine except, crystals or whatever. Yeah. And then, I don't know, I read some things about crystals, and I'm like, am I going to be able to leave any of it aside? Like, I don't know. So the levels of evidence has been really helpful to understand.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's important for people to know. People want to know that their doctors are practicing in a way that is science-based. And where are we learning these things? It's not just because we are making this stuff up or we want to believe it's true, but it's stuff that we have very concrete evidence. And it's not just because we're not in mainstream medicine doesn't mean that we don't have evidence for it. And that's important for the public to know.
Yeah,
And
I think there's a discovery of that, right? That for someone who's been in conventional medicine only, that it would be a surprise to them that there's actually, that we have a way of judging evidence that's in common. From the point of view of patients, I think it's complicated. I think that the work that we do is a little bit of a black box sometimes.
Mhm.
And, is there people out there who view it as a type of religion? Like, you go see someone who has sort of, inspired by a higher, I don't know, by some kind of energy that's not, concrete. Yeah, I don't know. I think there are people who are looking for all
Well,
sorts of different things. But to me, it's interesting that we have this thing in common with conventional medicine that we can say. And then we can say we also understand that some of us are departing from that and then are using more of the, I have a intuition, I have someone I trust, these are not necessarily scientific.
yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be different types of patients too. Some patients will just say, I don't care how you know it, just tell me what to do. But there's going to be other patients that are going to be like, doctor, well, I just want to make sure that that's actually accurate and I'm going to do my own research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And right, that's a difference too, right? It's like we don't feel threatened when people have done their own research. It's more like, oh, yes, this collaborative model of medicine. This is your health, your body, your life, your future and your money too.
Yeah,
And
they're entitled to
so
do their own research. I encourage it actually.
exactly, I think it's more fun. I get to explain at a higher level, which is more fun for me than just
Absolutely.
telling
Yeah. And I do feel like sometimes our colleagues who are still in the completely conventional model feel a little bit threatened or annoyed when people say they do their own research, in part
Totally.
because, in part, they don't have the time to explain it all, right? But in part, it's also because just the way we practice is a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. It's exhausting. I mean, if you have to see, I remember the last conventional medicine job I had 22 patients a day to see. And so, yeah, if everyone comes with their internet research, that's not possible. If only one person in that group of 22 comes with their internet research, maybe it's possible or you'll run behind. So no,
Yeah.
it's really kind of interesting. Yeah, no, this way it's different. It's like, oh, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna see what you have to say. We're going to use me for what it is that your purposes are. Do you want a sounding board? Do you want someone to tell you where this book learning fits in real life with experience and some perspective? In that case, yeah, I'm your person.
Yeah, yeah. And we get to personalize the approach to each patient a lot more in our practice than we did when we were just doing conventional medicine, for sure.
Which brings me back to something I wanted to say early on when we were talking about the idea that the alternative medicine has more of this idea that your body tends towards health. Is that actually this is something a lot of patients come believing already. And it feels almost like, to me, it feels a little mysterious, like, oh, where did you get this idea? Because it took me like 20 years to rediscover or discover it. And yet a lot of people come with this idea like, but it feels to me like I should be healthy if it weren't for some obstacle that you need to find for me, And people don't think of themselves, a lot of people don't think of themselves as irrevocably broken, And it's really fascinating to me that people have such a strong sense of their own selves. So I think it's one of the really exciting things to be
Yeah.
able to do to support that.
Absolutely. I definitely love that. And we want to support that. We don't want people to have the identity that they're sick and they will remain sick. We want people to know that they can recover health.
You don't give false hope to people. You just say, okay, so these are the things that will sometimes restore or at least stabilize or something like that. Yeah, you don't know 100% for sure, but this idea that, wait, what if actually I don't live expecting myself to disintegrate, without a constant input of chemicals. I don't know, like something like that. Yeah. And meanwhile, we don't leave them behind, right? Like you said, actually, still working in the conventional system, you know exactly what it's good for, that cannot be replaced by herbs and fasting. And same here. I'm happy to refer because it's been 14 years. So, I haven't been in a hospital or, in urgent care, let's say, for a very long time. And so this is where, I refer. But hopefully also having done those things for 20 years, I have a good sense of where they're needed.
Yeah.
So that's another part of CFIP, right? It's like knowing that your doctor knows, at which point do you need the conventional system? At which point is it the most appropriate for a person?
Yep. Yeah. And I'm very glad to be able to offer that to patients so that they know that sometimes, yes, absolutely. If you need something conventional, let's do it. If we want to do something not conventional, we can do that too. So it's great to be able to offer both of those.
Yeah, no, I think people really appreciate that because I think people haven't rejected either one. I mean, that's exactly the point. And it's a little artificial for them to have to step into one system or another and have to reject one or the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have really loved this conversation. I'm so excited about people knowing about your book and knowing about all these foundational practices. I feel like we touched on a ton of different topics. So if we can maybe give our listeners a little recap, some take-home messages, what would your take-home messages for our listeners be?
That when they come up with some issues, that they should sort of take them as almost a positive, like, all right, what symptoms do I have? Who's trying to talk to me? And what partner will I get to figure out how to get at something, come out ahead, right? This is like the symptom interrupts the pace of your life. There's something you need to focus on. How will I do this in a manner that will turn me into the healthier version of myself? And as a part of that, to be aware of foundational practices, things you can do that may sound simple, but actually have a very big impact. So I have the book and I also have a newsletter. So you mentioned it. It's a free newsletter. It's called Simple Science. It's hosted on Beehive, not Substack. So maybe same way that my book is on Barnes and not Amazon, the newsletter is on Beehive. And so you can find that online. It's free. You can sign up and I will continue to prioritize simple things. Try to avoid talking about supplements for as long as I can, because I think there are other tools and I'm pushing myself also to highlight those.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Very helpful. And thank you for everything that you do for your patients and to move science forward. So happy that we had this conversation today.
Thanks, Monica. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Truly Healthy MD. I'm Dr. Monica Jauregui, and I'm so glad you joined me today. Remember, your health is in your hands, and every choice, no matter how small, can move you closer to feeling your best. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It means so much to me. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay truly healthy.